All right, so we're going to go over the review, do some practice questions here. So first thing that you should do if you don't already have these written down somewhere is just make a list of the first 12 perfect squares. There's lots more, but these would be the ones we would expect you to know. So remember, you can always find this by just doing 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, and so on. Or you can always use your calculator. Okay, and that list keeps going. That's what we expect you to know. Okay, so when you are just simplifying, the whole idea is that you want to break a number down. As long as that number, like 300, isn't in the list already, we want to break this down into two different numbers that when you multiply them, you get 300. But one of those numbers has to come from this list. So if you can't think about it right away, I always just suggest starting with the number that you have, right, 300, and just divide it by the biggest number that's closest to it in that list. So in this case, it'd be 144. Oh, that's not a nice number. So I'm going to try 121. Oh, that's not a nice number, right? You're looking at my calculator. Now if I do 100, that works. So I'm going to put the nice one first. So 100 times 3 is 300. Now the one from the list has a nice square root, right? If I do the square root of 100, it's just 10. Not the square root of 10, but just 10. And then the square root of 3 can't simplify, so I just leave it. Okay? So then on a problem like number 2, where you have this number out front, we can kind of ignore that number for now and just do 96 the same way, right? So if I can't think of what the number is that goes into 96, I would just start dividing. So the closest number to 96 without going over would be 81. That's not a nice number, right? 64, that's not a nice number. 49, that's not. 36, nope. 25, nope. 16, 16 works, right? So we put both of these numbers in square roots, and then we take the nice square root. Well, the square root of 16 is 6, so I get 4 root 6. Now, before I said ignore that 5, but now I can't ignore it anymore. We bring it down, and when you bring it down, you multiply the like terms. So now we end up with 20 root 6 is our answer. Okay, so let's do another one. So 28, so again, we're going to kind of ignore that 6 for now, but 28, I can break that up, and I know that the biggest perfect square that goes into 28 is 4. 4 times 7. Now the square root of 4 is 2. It's not square root of 2, it's just 2. And it becomes 2 root 7, but now I bring down the 6, and we multiply. So 12 root 7 would be my answer. Okay? All right, so what happens when you have negative signs? Well, here was a key thing. The square root of negative 1 equals I. So we said whenever you have a negative number under a root, take out the negative 1 first, and then just leave the positive number. Well, the square root of negative 1 is I. Now this one, 49, that's in my list. Right, 49 is right here. That has a nice square root. So the square root of 49 is just 7. Not the square root of 7, but just 7. Right? So then when I rearrange this, I just put the number first and then the I, so 7I is my answer. Okay, same thing with negative 242. So right away I'm going to take out the negative 1, and then I'm just going to leave the 242. Now this one, 242, isn't in my list, so I need to divide things, right? So I'm going to start with the biggest number in there, so that's 144. Nope, that doesn't work. Next one is 121. That works. So I can break that up. And then the square root of 121 is 11, right? So that becomes 11 root 2. Now I still have this square root of negative 1, which is I. And this is right, but math grammar kind of says let's put the number first, and then the I, and then the square root always goes last. Okay? Last one from that group. So what happens when you have a negative root and a number in front? Same thing. Ignore that number in front for now. Take out the negative 1. Then you got your 500. Okay, and then we can break down the 500. Well, the biggest perfect square that goes into 500 is 100. This is I. Square root of 100 is 10. I leave the root 5, and I still have that I. And then again, this would be the best way to write that answer. Okay? All right, so next thing would be adding and subtracting roots. So they have to have the same root to be able to add and subtract them. So right now I have like root 6, root 24, root 27. None of those are the same. So we have to simplify what we can first. So square root of 6, I can't simplify that. So I'm just going to leave that 4 root 6. Now 24, I can break that down. 4 goes into 24, so this would be 2 root 6, but I still have this 2, so that becomes 4 root 6. So right now I have 4 root 6 plus 4 root 6, and then I can do the same thing with the 27. So 9 goes into 27, that's a perfect square, so that becomes 3 root 3. There's a minus before that, so it's minus 3 root 3. So after I simplify everything, now I have like terms because of the root 6s. Okay, so when I go to write my answer, I'm going to add my 4, so that's 8. I'm just going to leave the root 6 because that's my like term. Then I have minus 3 root 3. That's my answer. Okay, so adding and subtracting, the roots have to be the same. Now number 8, that one's asking us to multiply. So when you multiply like terms, that's different. That means you can multiply the outside numbers. 7 times 2, that's 14, and then you can multiply the inside numbers. 5 times 4, that's root 20. Okay, that's my answer, but I have to simplify it. So my root, there's a perfect square that goes into 20, it's 4. Square root of 4 is 2, but I still have that 14 on the outside, so I end up with 28 root 5. Okay, so adding and subtracting versus multiplying, those have different rules. All right, next target had to do with complex numbers, the i's. Just pay attention to what's in between the parentheses. If it's just adding, then all you're going to do is add your like terms. 4 plus 5, that's 9. Negative 7i plus 3i, that's minus 4i, you're done. Okay, it's just adding those. Big mistake is people distribute. You don't do that. Okay, number 10, now this one is subtract. You could put a minus 1 in there, and then you do have to distribute the negative sign. So this would stay the same, negative 8 plus 5i, but then this would be minus 2 and then plus 6i, negative times a negative. But then it's just like the last one, just combine your like terms. Right, negative 8 minus 2, that's negative 10. And then 5i plus 6i, that's 11i. Not 11i squared, we're just adding, so it's 11i. Okay, the one where you do distribute is where there is nothing in between the parentheses here. This one means multiply everything. So 2 times 6, that's 12. 2 times 9i, that's 18i. Negative 3i times 6, that's minus 18i. And then negative 3i times 9i, that's minus 27i squared. All right, I times I is I squared. Okay, notice that this plus 18i minus 18i, those cancel. So now I have 12 minus 27i squared. Well, here was your other fact. I squared equals negative 1. So anytime you have an I squared, like right here, we replace that with a negative 1. Okay, so this is still 12 minus 27, but then that's negative 27 times negative 1. So this is 12 plus 27, which is 39. Okay, so that was the big thing here. I squared equals negative 1. All right, last target was solving. So remember, when solving, don't forget to include the plus or minus. Whenever you take the square root, you have to use a plus or minus. All right, so let's do a couple of these. So if I want to get x by itself, I can't get rid of the squared yet until I get rid of anything else. So I'm going to add 6 to get rid of the minus 6. So now I have x squared equals 100. As soon as you have the x squared by itself, we can undo that squared by taking the square root. But whatever you do to one side, we have to do to the other. So this is x equals, now the square root of 100 is 10, but since I took the square root, it has to be plus or minus 10. And that's my answer. So there's 2 answers there. Okay, number 13 is very similar. The squared is already by itself, so I can square root this right away. So I do get x alone. But now I have, again, I took the square root, so right away, plus or minus the square root of negative 27. Now I'm not allowed to leave a negative under my root. So I'm going to simplify this. So I'm going to take that negative 1 out, just like we did before. That's I. Now 27 has a perfect square that can go into it. 9 can. Okay, so this becomes 3, root 3 with an I. Don't forget your plus or minus. And that's an okay answer, but the best way to write this would be plus or minus 3I root 3. Okay. All right, number 14, this one has a little extra piece to it, so we can't square root until we get rid of that 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So we have x squared equals negative 12. Now I can square root both sides. So we got x equals, I took the square root, so right away I have plus or minus the square root of negative 12. Okay, I'm going to break that down because I can't have a negative. So I have plus or minus, I have negative 1 and 12. Okay, square root of negative 1 is I. And again, there is a perfect square that goes into 12. That's 4. Well, the square root of 4 is 2. So again, this is okay, but best way to write this would be 2 and then the I and then the root 3. Okay, so you could have the I's in there too. All right, last type is when you have parentheses. So in this case, we want to get the squared expression by itself. So I'm going to add the 3 first. All right, we're going to get rid of that first. So now I have x plus 4 squared equals 49. Okay, now I can't do anything inside the parentheses until I get rid of the squared. So now I can square root this whole thing. That's just going to get rid of the squared. Don't really need the parentheses anymore. So I'm just left with what's underneath, which is x plus 4. Now I square rooted, so this isn't just 7, it's plus or minus 7. Okay, I need to get x by itself, so now I'm going to subtract 4. And then be careful when you write this. This is plus or minus 7 minus 4. Okay, this does not mean plus or minus 3. This means I'm going to branch this out into 2 separate things. It means positive 7 minus 4, and it means negative 7 minus 4. It means 2 separate things because of that plus or minus. So 7 minus 4 is 3. Negative 7 minus 4 is negative 11. Okay, so your 2 answers are 3 and negative 11. You can only do that if you have like terms here, like no roots, no i's, nothing like that. Okay? All right, thanks.